start with the select board meeting. Worrying about the technical difficulties that I'm having.
And
Yeah,
the sound is really in and out, at least on my end.
okay. I wonder if it's the air conditioning interfering with the microphone.
It could be her hearing.
I don't know if anybody else is having trouble, but I definitely, it's as if the mic is going in and out.
I'm
And
having the same difficulty, Becky.
Yeah, I think it can be, there's air blowing. That's nice. So, there we go. Brian, present?
Yes.
Kathy, present. This is a form, if Becky is present on, so.
Alan is having the same problem as I. You all are, it's very garbled sounding.
Sorry.
You're breaking up about every other word.
Is this any better?
So far, yes.
Okay. The mute carrot above the carrot line, the mute, the one that we can do the mute down the bottom. Got a little up arrow. Maybe I'll do the microphone there. Is there a speaker audio settings? Maybe I'll increase the volume of the microphone. Oh, looks like it's up.
There was a noise canceling option where you just were to.
I dropped that. Excellent. Becky, can you hear me or is it just Ann?
I can hear you now.
Looks like somebody came back.
I don't know who's talking now, but now it's garbled. Whoever was just talking.
There was just some chatter in the room. Can you hear me?
I can hear you, Kathy, yes.
So make sure one person at a time.
Yeah. Can we go back to the previous slide? Okay. The warrant is set. The discussion is on the articles on the warrant. We can't add anything to the meeting at this point. And if there's something that somebody wants to eliminate, that would happen at the town meeting itself. If there are changes that people want, the changes would be done as amendments at the meeting. And the polite thing to do if you're planning on amending something is to write it out and give it to Alan in advance. The next most polite is to write it out so that you can be handed out at meetings. And if you have something that occurs to you at the meeting, Brian, bring a piece of paper so you can scribble something down. This is a very short slideshow, an overview of each of the 7 articles on the warrant. We will take questions on all of them, and we've got subject area experts here to give you answers. Next slide. Can we thank you. Article 1 is the school district operating budget. As you know, town voted for an operating budget at the Springtown meeting. That budget depended on an override in Essex, which didn't succeed. And now we're being asked to vote on a lower. Any questions on the school budget? Yes, Karen.
Not question. I was just wondering if we can reword this in a way that, because it says that reduction in Manchester's 7 fewer teachers and 4 fewer teacher assistants. That would seem like teachers are getting fired or assistants are getting fired, but it's with the positions that are getting reduced, not the people, not the teachers.
But there are open positions.
No, they are retired, attritions or, you know, whatever other reasons, but nobody is getting fired.
Well, TAs are being let go.
Not the
If
teachers.
positions are being let go, we've had good fortune that people are retiring. We can call them position cuts. There are, in fact, 7 fewer teachers. Yes. That's that last year. Any other questions? People online?
I guess I have a question. No, it's just about this.
You're Mary Foley.
Mary Foley, 1 Pulaski Drive, not knowing too much about the school budget, but with the first go around, you would have known that there was retiring teachers, correct?
Not necessarily. We took out 4 teachers in December that we knew were either going to be positions that weren't filled and wouldn't be filled in the next year, or would be people leaving at the end of the year. We'll revise the budget in April. In March, after we close the budget, we're actually still getting retirements. Retirements come as late as today.
Okay, so you didn't know until April.
And we wouldn't have taken them as cuts, and we didn't have to. We would replace them, don't know.
Pam, does that mean larger class sizes or reduced programs, or what's the implication?
So if you follow this, the saga from the fail, there was a version that did reduce some program. That was the pushback that we talked about. The program at the high school is stable. Yeah. We're seeing class size at the elementary where the majority of the reductions have come from. But we're just at benchmark, so we can make it through next year. I think it needs to be a watch and see. And our concern is if the budget situation continues as is, it's going to be general cost increases all the way around without any resources.
How many choice slots did you open this year? Have you decided?
If we want, was it 20 or 25? For Chippewa School, just under 100 here at this year, so yeah. There. Great, can you see if there's anyone online? Welcome. When you're presenting, it's very fun.
So, yeah, so hands, I think, more.
Okay, then we can go to the next slide.
I'm sorry to interrupt again. And is there anybody from 1623 there?
No,
Okay,
we're
All right.
hearing an echo as Greg logs in with his phone so that he can use his screen to display the,
no,
Oh.
it's not the echo. It's still a hard time getting what's being said. And I just want to make sure for anybody listening, they're able to get the information accurately.
That happens in most meetings in here, if you try to listen.
It's the, I'm pretty sure it's the air conditioning right now blowing. I can hear it blowing and that interferes with the audio.
Whoever just spoke, I couldn't understand a word you said.
Kathy was saying that it's probably the air conditioning. We need probably to speak up.
Is it possible to turn the air conditioning off or something at this point? Otherwise, it's
Pointless.
it's pointless, exactly.
Okay, can you hear us any better now?
Yes,
That seems better, yes.
Okay,
Right, we'll still try and speak up.
Thank you.
the next slide looks very simple. It's a very complicated problem. When we discovered that the school budget would be $490,000 less, the school cost to Manchester would be $490,000 less than anticipated. The finance committee recommended moving 400 of that for payment for the fields. And that is contingent on the schools borrowing to pay for the fields, which is uncertain. But if the schools do borrow, then Manchester will have $400,000 to put in to reduce the total amount of bond. Avi, do you have anything?
I think the whole thing is contingent on whether or not we can go forward with the financing plan. And then we'll have to discuss what the backup market will be in terms of these reserves. Just make sure the project goes forward and then.
Can't understand Avi at all.
And that's what Pam was saying that the way the field renovation is going to be funded depends on the outcome of the votes on the operating budget. And what I am trying to say is simply that we have $400,000 set aside that we can't use if the decision to pay for the fields goes toward borrowing.
I have a question about that, if I may, Ann.
Certainly, Becky.
The question is, the 400,000 that the town of Manchester would borrow, that comes off of to reduce borrowing costs for Manchester. Is that not for the school district? Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, I just think that might be a question that would be asked. Thank you.
excuse me, Anne, if I could,
Yes.
that's not quite correct. Because
Okay. Right.
the $1.2 million that may be borrowed would be borrowed by the school district, not by Manchester.
Yes. But Manchester can pay down its part.
Yes, that's right. That would reduce our share of the debt service. But it's a technical point, but I think it's important to understand that Manchester is not going to be doing any of the borrowing. It's the school district that will borrow.
Thank you.
Can I ask a clarification question? So let me know if I'm correct, because I think a lot of people have the questions about the field funding and a concern that if the Brook Street is not going to be done. So 1.6 total. Manchester already paid back in April the town meeting 400,000, which is the 50% of its share. So the rest is the district 1.2 million. 1.2 million, 1/3 Essex 400K, 2/3 Manchester 800K. So Essex, that's in questions. Potentially they are going to be having a vote in the fall to pay from their free cash. The 800K is what we're talking about, the Manchester portion. The Article 2 is saying that out of the 800,000, we will pay cash 400,000, yeah? And then the district will borrow 400K bond. The 400K bond, even though it's borrowed by the district, is 100% responsible to be paid by the Manchester town. Yes.
If I could make a suggestion, because I think we plan to show these slides again on Tuesday.
I think we plan to edit these slides based on what we hear.
What I would recommend is a pie chart. That the total of the pie chart is 1.6. Okay, this slice, boom, already paid for. This other slice, Essex. This slice, this is what we're talking about in Article 2. Highlight it, dollar amount, what it means. That would be my suggestion.
But I think in addition to the funding is the timing that people are concerned about, myself as well. So if we voted through the 400K cash, we will have received 800,000 cash total from Manchester, right? So there will be out of the 1.6, there's still 800K left. I think the question would be for us to continue with both fields, because Highland is starting next week.
They're starting production. next week,
Right,
Yeah.
so Highland is starting next week, and then we will be funding that through, is it the reserve or the 800K we already received from Manchester?
So
Or 400K, I should say.
I'm gonna try to, he's gonna jump in with all the technical stuff. We're trying to get it into kind of like person speak, so project is supposed to start. We believe they have to go through all of their permitting pieces first. There are conditions that have been set by Concom, so they begin by going through and ensuring that all of the conditions are met before they can do anything. So they'll be starting, but there won't be any groundwork done until Concom signs off, whether it's through their admin or through the board on the conditions. We believe that the first cash flow payment to facilitate the project will be due sometime end of July, beginning of August. We have no funding unless Essex lifts its opposition and or goes forward and has a vote. So until we know that result, we would have to put money into cash flow via school choice reserves, because that's the reserve account the school committee can appropriate on its own. So we would be coming and asking for dissemination of funds from that reserve account as we get invoiced for stages of the project.
So the 400,000 that Manchester already paid, where does that sit?
We have no access to Manchester money until Essex makes a decision on what it's going to do. So this project at this point is unfunded. Other than a commit, because school committee hasn't committed through vote reserve funds directly. So we have an unfunded project right now. We can cash flow the project, but the vote was never, the vote the school committee took was to seek finance and submitted those requests to both towns. Manchester acted on it for, we had all done the same conversation first. We didn't go at it alone. And it went through town meeting process, questions, and then succeeded at the ballot. Essex has stopped moving forward on this process. So until they do, we're kind of in limbo.
So even after we vote this 400K next week, plus the 400K we already voted in April, we won't be able to access it. We mean this district won't be able to access it till Essex vote in November. Then both towns pass, then you have access to the 800 plus 400K,
Yep.
1.2. Okay. Then in the meantime, we will fund it from the reserve, Highland first, then Brook Street potentially.
Yes.
I think the question is, are we going to go ahead and fund it from Brook Street from our school choice reserves while we're waiting on Essex to vote?
I think that's the plan. Going to get discussed at school committee just to get public affirmation that that's their will. Because I think it needs to be said directly to them as a body. They are, what's the right phrase to use? Taking a chance of owning the entire cost of the project and depleting the entire school choice fund on the fields because we don't have a guarantee on an alternate funding source. So it's a gamble that, we can talk about with that group to see if they want to approve it going forward. But I think we feel like we need to publicly disclose that to the full committee, that at this point, there's a financing plan, but there is no way for us to access the available resources or the funding until Essex acts. So we would be putting up our own money without guarantee that we will be able to recoup that. Now, the only concern about recouping that is the capital project list, which would be funded through that account. And that would be emergency funds for Essex along with the identified project for this coming year. So if we take that whole account down to nearly zero, we would have very few middle of the year emergency funds available to us. That would kick it. Like if something really big happened, I'm saying 350 or above, based on my recollection of the slide, we would need a special town meeting to access excess and efficiency funds. So that's a whole other project. So that's why we are having this conversation about the importance of reserves. They do serve a purpose, and even if their purpose is to be there as a rainy day fund, we have had rainy days in the past, so better to be prepared. So I feel like we just need to fully disclose that in a really clear, if not getting into bonds and paybacks, but really just what's at stake if we cannot execute the plan in place. Sorry, a lot. So,
Doesn't Manchester pay half of the coach-ed field? So in actuality, some portion of those funds would actually be available to the district
Yeah.
for the coach-ed field portion of the work. So whatever, if it's simple, 1.6 total, 800 to 800, Manchester's share of coach-ed is 400.
that's
So,
great.
so you would actually
Yeah.
Emily's question, you would actually be using the 400. I presume that this authorization of this plus the prior authorization is related to the funding of coach-ed as well as Highland.
I think what you're saying is that the last 400K is available already. Because that is separate.
Right, 400 for coach-ed.
But yeah.
Coach-ed.
Yeah.
And I guess, can I also just say, what you just said is that you've decided, at least your recommendation to the school committee is that the reserves for capital projects are going to prioritize the fields if that's not funded by the towns. These are going to be your recommendation at the expense of other capital projects and deferring those. Which is dangerous.
I don't know if I'd call it a recommendation.
Right.
I think it is. It's a discussion about whether or not we want to make a good faith judgment that Essex is going to carry through with its intended work in November. I don't think for anyone recommending that means draw down those school choice funds. We're really concerned about Essex Elementary.
Mhm.
And we just have other regular maintenance projects to maintain the high school, bring technology parity to them. So there are real things, there are 5 years worth of commitments tagged to those funds, so if it doesn't work out the way it's intended, we're really left with few resources to manage those.
But just so everybody understands that right now our reserve, the district reserve is 3.4 million, 3.2-ish. And then the school choice that you mentioned, that's earmarked for the field is 1.5. So even if we were to, even if we have to draw down from the school choice from the 1.2 from 1.5.
Yep.
There is still the rest that we can
That's
potentially.
PNG, right?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
can't access that during the year. It's closed down now until next
Yeah.
budget season.
Even for the capital expenses.
It has to be put into the budget as a line item and voted on and approved.
During the
During
town
the-
meeting season, not during mid-year. E&D can only be accessed because during the year, once you're past that time, you're operating a new year and your E&D could change.
So it's the school choice that we can access, not the END.
That's the
Indeed.
fund, that's the emergency fund, so to speak, that school committee we can bring an issue, we'll go back to the example of the water line at Memorial School, the $400,000 unexpected project that came. We brought that issue to school committee and asked them to appropriate from school choice funds up to $400,000 to manage that. We could do that in a 2-week turnaround, or we could call it emergency meeting of school committee. Can't do that with the E&D funds. So that's where we're going to be handcuffed a little bit. And where when you start to look at the Habib report, when you want to take issue on something being 1 year or 2 years out, and whether or not he's to the penny on every estimate, there are some big ticket items in there that if they go, we'll need to act quickly on.
So if we were to use the school choice reserve first to advance the project, can we get reimbursed, get from the towns, this 400K and the Essex 400K, and then the bond 400K into our school choice? Is that the process that you will actually get reimbursed into the school choice? Then you'll build that back to 1.5 again, ideally.
Yeah, I think we can have a discussion at that point, whether it goes to school's choice or stabilization, because both would work the same way. But yes, that's the intent, but if we don't get the agreement, then we can't access any more than 50% of coaches.
Yeah.
That's the big thing that's hanging out there. That's the stressor.
So if the school committee was to authorize in the coming meeting to advance to use their school choice reserves, then both projects, Highland will and Brook Street will.
Yeah, and I think the current thinking on the timeline is on track for August completion of Highland Field. And likely Brook Street to begin September. October 6th.
Brook Street to be ready
To begin in October,
to end
end in October.
end at the end of September is the timeline to finish Brook Street.
But if Manchester gave us 400,000 to start for the Brook Street, but we're starting on the Highland first, is that okay? Because we are using that money not for the intent.
The
We wouldn't be
timeline is
using-
being set by the contractor, sorry.
No, you first.
No, the timeline's being set by the contractor.
And well, and also just to clarify, so Manchester has essentially done each of the steps that it needed to do for
Yes,
each of
yes.
the obligations that it had. So school committee in its planning process decided to proceed with Highland first because we could tell the contractors to get going back in the spring because we knew that that project was a priority based on condition of the field to happen, and we wanted that to be ready for the start of the athletic season. So that is already in motion as we've kind of proved and discussed. So once the school committee authorizes, if they authorize Brook Street, then the funding that Manchester put in back a couple months ago for its share.
Yeah.
Would become available
Right away.
right away.
Yeah, okay.
And then this funding is all dependent on when we do
Essex.
financing together with Essex, in which case it would immediately reduce the share that Manchester would borrow.
I think.
Sorry, that we would borrow and assess obligations, but
I think Alan Wilson has a comment. Alan?
Thank you, Ann. I would like to respectfully suggest that this is a discussion for the school committee and really is only marginally relevant to the special town meeting.
Okay, the details of this, the question in front of the town meeting is whether to take funds that have become available and allocate them specifically for the fields. Are there other?
Ask a question on that, and I guess the 400,000 that maybe I shouldn't ask, where does that money sit now?
It doesn't, it would be raised and appropriate. But be part of your taxes for next year.
Okay, so these are tax increases. The
No,
four hundred thousand that's already slated for Brook Street, and then this 400,000?
So the reason why this is on the agenda is because the new budget is $500,000 less. So the finance committee and the select board said, okay, if we're saving 500,000 on the operating budget, we should ask voters to approve capital item, a new capital item, raise and appropriate 400,000.
So are you doing the 400,000 plus the 400,000?
Correct.
Okay, so what's the tax increase per resident for 800,000?
If this is approved,
Mhm.
the tax increase will be below 2%. By back in April, you approved a 2.2% increase.
So
And,
I'm just-
and
Yes,
may I ask who is speaking with Greg? Who is that?
Mary Foley is asking Greg what the impact on the tax rate is of this Article 2.
Okay, I only asked because I just heard someone talking and had no idea who it was, so I just wanted to make sure that we get that. All right, thank you.
So is it fair to say that from April to July 1, the 2%, 2.5%, and now 2%, so 4.5%, within that time frame?
Yeah.
Okay,
At the end of April town meeting.
Yeah.
Projected tax rate is going to grow 2.19%.
okay,
With the reduction of the school budget, that would be a reduction of 500,000, which would drop the projected tax rate to about 0.5%. So by putting this field back into the budget,
Mhm.
you would go back to just under 2% for projected tax rate.
Tax rate increase, tax rate increase.
Tax rate increase
for the year,
for the whole year.
thank you.
Are there any other questions? So this was complicated. Okay, then I'm presenting an introduction to the 3 zoning articles to see if I can make it slightly more clear. Article 3 revises the section of the zoning bylaws that talks about authority and procedures. If Article 3 passes, then we skip Article 4. And if not, then we go on to Article 4. Article 4 returns some material that had been removed from the bylaws in its original language. And Article 5 is minor errors. Next is Article 3. Sarah, would you like to?
Sure. So Article 3 is a new and improved administration and procedures section. It's improved by, first of all, it does not change any use regulations. It's really strictly the final chapter of zoning and the final chapter of our efforts to renumber and clarify and update. It details the role of the building inspector, which is not currently detailed. It includes a description of the zoning board of appeals and the planning board. Planning board is not currently described in the zoning. It has stronger penalties for violations in that there are criminal and non-criminal violations. It also includes site plan review and special permit applicability, and it links these to the appropriate sections, appropriate review criteria in section 6, which was already approved in November. It also has legally required requests for reasonable accommodations, which addresses housing protocol for high-handicap persons, and site plan review criteria for Dover amendment to certain nonprofit uses. All of the changes in section 12 were made with the advice of legal counsel in the attempt to make our zoning more up to date, legally defensible.
There are 2 handouts on this. One handout.
The people on there's a summary page. Changes.
And they are on the website. At the link.
Yeah, if people are watching online, you can go to the planning board website, go to the back one slide. That link will bring you right to the planning board section of the town's website, and it has the full language of the articles as well as the summary and a more detailed table, excruciating detailed complaint. Comparing section 12 new and section 12 existing.
Are there questions? Just
Jennifer is Blossom Lake. I was wondering whether or not it would be helpful under the special permits where it says refers to section 6 for specific review criteria. Maybe mention what that is. I know we voted on this in the fall, but people aren't going to remember what happened in the fall. I don't know if you want to have a little write up in there about that, or that people might understand what that means. That's all. Yeah, just a suggestion.
Once again, may I ask who's speaking?
that was Donna first, who did identify herself.
Thank you.
And just to answer Don's question, site plan and special permit review includes things like, help me out, everybody, traffic, topography, neighborhood impacts, stormwater, site plan review, utilities, consistency with the neighborhood, and gives the planning board broad discretion about acting in the best interest of the town with public and public hearing input from abutters and the town.
So, Donna Furs, Blossom Lane, Becky. Sorry. But on 6.3, we talked a little bit about waivers. And which is attached to Article 12. So again, I want it all tied in so that everybody really understands what the planning board can waive specific things with special permits at 6.3.
We've already accepted 6.3. The town,
I'm just saying, it's just explaining Article 6 and the thing is, I'm not questioning whether to take it out or not. I'm just asking for it to be, so here it says refers to section 6 for specific review criteria, maybe just bulletproofing some specific things of Article 6.
that would lead, in my opinion, to people thinking that they could alter section 6, which is not on the warrant.
I'm just saying what's the difference between here and here. It's just explaining. We had issues in the fall of the public not understanding what we're voting on. We're not voting on Article 6, we're just explaining what 12 is all about. Just saying just about information and education. That's all. Well, I'm asking.
I think the suggestion to add a description of site plan in a small box about what site plan criteria are is fine. I don't see any problem. It's not on the warrant, but on the website, we can take it and extract it.
And if I may,
Yes,
I'm very concerned about adding items in unless it is we're discussing the town warrant right now. We're not discussing flyers or handouts. And it concerns me if we start putting in or having information that is not going to be voted upon. Thank you.
thank you, Becky.
We have it.
I,
We're looking at it.
yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. I think that, no, I agree with Bonnie as well. A short narrative of what we're
We
describing.
can put it
Yeah,
easily.
it's just a narrative.
On the
Just,
website.
you know, just a narrative of what, when you say for section 6, this is what section 6 is all about. And that's it. Maybe even expand the box if you could. I don't know.
Are there any other questions on the revised section 12?
So then,
Sarah,
yeah, the next, no, it's gonna go to the next one.
next.
So if section 12 is not adopted, we very much hope it will be. All we did was just provide the legacy language that was used to identify site plan review criteria and reinsert it where it had been historically in section 6.5. Now we recommend that it go in section 12 as part of our renumbering, but in the event that didn't pass for some reason, our effort here was simply same exact language that was there prior to November 2022, reinserted in the same exact place. The reason it's important is that site plan review criteria is important to identify those projects that require site plan. In particular, the big self-signaling project, although elsewhere in the bylaw, it is subject to site plan review, but this is very clear and it links to the site plan review specifications and review criteria. So, and this is kind of a belt and suspenders. And as Ann said, if Article 3 passes, we will pass over this.
Other questions?
So I do have.
Yeah.
One concern. So the old site plan review process under section 6, had site plan approval and then had site plan approval special permit.
Yes.
And under site plan approval, it talked about 5 to 10 parking spaces. And under site plan approval special permit, it talked about 10 or more.
I believe site plan review special permit was deleted on recommendation of Mark Bobrowski.
Right. So the 5.52, the original, the legacy, only refers to 5 to 10. And I think we want to delete the but less than 10. You want to have it 5 or more, site plan approves. So I think we need to take a look at that. You may want to just amend that from the floor by striking but less than 10, so that it applies to anything with 5 or more.
Okay, we can put that on our agenda for Monday before testing.
So I think you should take a look at that.
Okay, great, thank you.
Right. That's,
I don't think so.
okay.
5. And the last one is we renumbered the zoning from I think 5 or 6 sections to now 12. Reorganized it. I think 6 or 8 people went through it and checked and rechecked the cross-referencing. And we missed a few things. And so this article is to fix those typos, essentially. The only section I think might concern people is in the groundwater protection section. We are recommending a whole section of deleted text. You can see when you look at that text that it has nothing to do with groundwater protection. It actually belongs in section 5 where it does reside. And somehow it was also copied into section 10. And we just want to delete it there. We are not altering the groundwater protection bylaw.
Are there questions? It's the end of the zoning.
Hopefully it is the end of this one.
Okay. I guess I'll speak quickly to this. As many people are aware, the ladder truck has been out of service for a long time. It is well over 20 years old. The expected life ladder truck is 20 to 22 years. And the select board and finance committee felt that it was to our interest to start now to get a new truck. There's a 2-year lead for trucks, and the price goes up quarterly. And our incoming fire chief has said that he will also look for demo trucks or used trucks. And we will sell the existing ladder truck, which has considerable value outside of Massachusetts. It's because it's failed Massachusetts specific emissions tests. So that money will go back. This whole, all of the money involved comes from the fire equipment reserves, which have been built up over years. It drains all of it, but some of that can be replenished with the funds that come in from the sale of. Are there? Yes, Mary.
Mary Foley, how much is in the fire reserve right now?
1.32.
Okay, so that would,
But we don't have enough. There are other accounts.
So how we get to 1.5, we have the 1.3 and change in the existing reserve account. The article further asks to take the proceeds from selling the mini pumper. We have a purchase and sale for that for 180,000. So those two numbers combined get us to 1.5. And then it also asks to formally rescind the vote that was made a few town meetings ago for a new ambulance, which was also drawing from this 1.32. So that 400,000 approval would be rescinded to free up those dollars.
So 400,000 would go. So basically, if this was approved, we got a fire truck for 1.5, we'd have 400,000 in the fire reserve fund.
No, you would have, you basically have
Here.
zero.
Okay. Just to get a full picture, is the incoming fire chief saying he needs any other equipment in the short term? Any other expenses, like to come up in November town meeting and for next?
Not major. Nothing of this magnitude. No, nothing.
Yep, Karen Bennett, 28 Lincoln. Can you just tell me why the ambulance, we approved it, but it wasn't bought? Can someone fill me in a little bit on that?
So the town has had a frontline ambulance, but it kept the old ambulance as a reserve. And the thinking is rather than maintain two ambulances, we can outfit the engine as a what's called a class 5 ambulance, which is a non-transport ambulance. So it can still serve as a frontline paramedic response. So it's more cost effective to do that than it is to have two ambulances always in-house. So that thinking was the idea to buy a second ambulance was rethought based on this new approach.
Is it going to last, or are we gonna have to buy another one in a year?
The ambulance?
Yeah.
The ambulance is 7 to 8 year life typically. This one is 3 or 4 years old. So we have a few years to refund the reserve in preparation for that purchase in a few years. Becky has her hand raised.
Yes, Becky.
Hi, thank you. Karen, if I may, Anne, address Karen, her questions
Yes.
through you. It was, Karen, a lot of that information, the fire chief, Chief Cleary had made requests of items that would either be put into surplus, meaning we no longer needed, or he requested equipment. And there was a lot of there were a lot of changes. So requests made by the chief ended up changing. And this was not something that the board was doing. We were being requested by the chief. And do we have the information, Greg, online that has the ages of the various equipment and expected life of those?
Yeah. So we have the presentation that Chief Cleary provided is also on the town meeting webpage.
Right, that's what I thought. Okay, thank you.
Are there any further questions about the ladder truck? The next, Tiffany has posted a link, but
this is the presentation I was just speaking about. This is the link to it.
right.
She just put it on the chat for those at home.
And the final article is to set up a salary reserve account. We have 3 union contracts that were due this year. The clerical union and the DPW have signed a memorandum of understanding. And this money will pay for those contracts so that the people get their raises on July 1st as they would expect, rather than having to delay it to the fall meeting and pay them in arrears. And we have an unexpected. The fire department will have a need for some overtime money for the first 2 weeks of July. This was not anticipated at the time the budget was put together. It happened because the new firefighters will still be in school for the first 2 weeks in July. After that, they become fully certified firefighters and paramedics and count fully toward our fire force personnel. So it's not a huge amount of money, but we didn't put a huge amount of money in the fire department overtime because we were hiring new firefighters and expected that we would not need as much of it. Are there any questions here or at home?
Just a quick question.
Yes, Mary.
Foley. So how many people is this covering?
The reserve,
Yeah, so how many people are there that with newly set up contract? Just curious.
oh, 35, 40.
Oh, wow, okay. So it's not a big amount per person?
No.
Pretty minor, okay.
So we had budgeted in the original budget 2.5% increases. But we knew that that would probably be not quite enough given inflation, but we hadn't had the negotiations yet. So this is not a surprise to us, but it's not as you said, it's not a big amount per person.
But any given year, you just wait until the next budget season or fall town meeting or something.
Well, so we typically negotiate contracts every 3 years.
Oh,
So this occasionally happens on that 3-year cycle if we didn't anticipate enough in the original budget. And quite frankly, we didn't want to budget a whole amount because when the union say, "Oh, you got the money,"
right.
you know, so we tend to want to hold that a little bit back.
The next slide is just links and other questions that have occurred to people as we go through that didn't come out at the discussion of a particular item. This presentation will be online if it's not already tomorrow.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone here, and especially those people who have held on through the problems with the sound at home. Is there a motion to adjourn the selectmen meeting? So moved.
Second.
And roll call vote, Brian. Emily, yes. I say yes. And again, thank Becky.
I say yes.
I can't see you, Becky, so we don't use it.
You can't see me?
Thank you very much. I think my slide's too big. We couldn't have hands. No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
That's not gonna know.